Welcome back everybody to another comparison. Today I want to talk about Milwaukee versus Washington DC, two cities that are very different, but they also have one thing in common. They have seen a massive transformation over the last 10 years. If you live in Washington DC, you know what I'm talking about. So with that, let's get to it. Milwaukee versus Washington DC. Washington DC and Milwaukee are a very interesting comparison. I have always enjoyed visiting DC for many reasons. Most of all, I find it fascinating to actually see the government at work, and that is an awe-inspiring feeling. DC is home to the White House, the United States Capitol, and the National Mall, which are all symbols of our country's history and democratic system. But that's not what this video is about. We want to talk about the lifestyle each city can offer and how it feels different to live in one or the other. So we're going to compare the two cities in 5 major categories, from climate to economy, and the last one is going to be cost of living. So if you're considering to move, stick around for that. And as a little bonus before the end of this video, if you're curious about what living in Milwaukee looks like, we will take a quick look at 3 very different example neighborhoods here in Milwaukee. Before we get started, I want you to know that I live in Milwaukee, and as much as I love visiting friends and family in DC, I have actually never lived there. So this video is based on interviews with people who know both cities, the feedback that I've gotten from people who have moved from DC to Milwaukee, and of course a lot of online research. Your personal experience may be actually quite a bit different, and I would love to see your comments below, whether you agree or disagree with me, or if you want to highlight an issue that I've not covered in this video. Alright, let's get to it. When it comes to history and culture, Washington is definitely second to none. With over 70 museums and about 160 monuments, there is no shortage of interesting stuff to look at and to learn about. DC is also very popular with millennials who love the vibe and the opportunities. The US Capitol is also very diverse, which is rooted in its history. One of the main draws for people moving to Washington is of course the very stable job market. An estimated 40% of the population is employed by government agencies. DC is full of ambitious people, and you'll notice a lot of them are burning the midnight oil. Based on this, it takes quite a bit of effort to make friends and maintain a social life outside of work. If you work in DC, it's also best to live in DC, because if you have to commute, traffic is one of the worst in the country. While Washington might be great for your professional career, it is not known to be super family friendly, and most public schools are not rated very high. And there are also other challenges. Housing is an issue the city is working on very hard, and you see a lot of new developments. Another issue for the city is income inequality, which is actually one of the worst in the US. And as a consequence of this disparity, crime is a bit of a concern. And finally, living well in DC is not exactly cheap. But before we get too far into the details, let's back up and start with number 1. Milwaukee is located on the shore of Lake Michigan, which is one of the largest freshwater bodies in the world, and it looks very much like an ocean. Milwaukee is located about 300 miles further north than Washington, about the same as Boston, and that makes a difference for the climate. Both cities have full 4 seasons, but Milwaukee is generally a bit cooler year-round. This means winters tend to be longer in Milwaukee, but also have generally gotten milder over the last years. Most of the time, we don't even have snow on the ground. Interestingly, Washington gets on average more snow and more rain than Milwaukee, which sees on average a few more sunny days. Summer is generally great in Milwaukee. Temperatures are usually very pleasant, between 75 and 85 degrees, with about half as many muggy days as Washington. Lake Michigan's huge body of cold water tends to moderate summer temperatures, and it is always cooler by the lake. Fall is one of the best seasons in Milwaukee. The weather is usually dry and mild until early November. And generally, outside of an occasional thunderstorm, Milwaukee is considered relatively climate stable and does not see a lot of extreme weather. Milwaukee proper and Washington DC are roughly the same size. About 600,000 people live in the city of Milwaukee and about 700,000 in DC. However, that picture changes quite a bit when you look at the entire metro area. The Washington MSA includes Arlington and Alexandria with a total population of 6.3 million people. The Milwaukee metro area is quite a bit smaller in comparison, with about 1.6 million people. Ranked by population, Milwaukee is a medium-sized MSA and ranks number 40 out of 100 in the US. Washington's economy is about 5 times bigger than Milwaukee. The total economic output of the metro area is about $511 billion compared to Milwaukee's $102 billion. Washington is also home to 11 Fortune 500 companies. Milwaukee can list 6, which are Northwestern Mutual, the Manpower Group, Kohl's, Pfizer, WEC Energies, and Rockwell Automation. Harley-Davidson is another big name in Milwaukee, but slightly missed the top 500 last year. The largest economic sector in Washington outside of government administration are science, tech, and healthcare. Milwaukee has a very diverse economy that is not dependent on one specific industry. The largest sectors are manufacturing, trade, and healthcare. Both metro areas have very strong job markets. As of December 2022, the unemployment rate was 2.8% in Washington and 2.9% in the Milwaukee area, which puts both of them well below the national unemployment rate of 3.5%. Work-life balance seems to be a bit better in Milwaukee. A lot of people move to Washington specifically to work hard and advance their career, either working for the government or in the private sector. People in Milwaukee are also hardworking, perhaps even more so in the colder season, but they definitely make up for it in the summer when social life and recreation become more of a priority. Taking a vacation up north is a big part of Milwaukee's summer lifestyle. And up north is typically a geographic reference, but it also describes a state of mind that usually involves a cabin on a lake with some beer and definitely no internet connection. And this gets us to the next topic, which is the density of Washington and being located in the fork between two rivers have one major drawback. Getting from A to B can be difficult and traffic is sometimes a real nightmare, especially if you're trying to commute from the surrounding suburbs to an office in Washington. If you can ditch the car, do it. Washington has one of the best public transportation systems and people also tend to bike a lot. If you don't want to keep your own bicycle around, you can just grab one from Capital Bike Share on one of their 700 stations. The annual membership is $95 and gives you unlimited rides. And they also have e-bikes, which is pretty cool. Parking is often a challenge in DC and it is quite expensive. No wonder people will hop on a bike or use public transportation instead whenever they can. Milwaukee is much more of an automotive city. Most people use their car to get around all the time. Public transportation is basically a bus system because Milwaukee does not have a subway. The downtown area is now served also with a brand new streetcar called the Hop, which probably will continue to expand. There is not much of an incentive to switch from car to public transportation in Milwaukee. Traffic is actually relatively light in Milwaukee compared to a lot of other big cities in the US. Most of Milwaukee's suburbs were developed after the 1950s, which means Milwaukee has been built for cars. Milwaukee is also half-jokingly known as a 20-minute city because you can get anywhere in usually under 20 minutes. The city planners have done a very good job with the freeway system. It is very easy to get around, quick to get downtown, and also quick to get out to the rural areas. Parking is usually readily available and also quite inexpensive. Even downtown, I generally expect to find parking right away. If you like to travel and need an airplane to get there, Washington has an advantage. It is served by 3 major airports and between them offer 320 non-stop flights to destinations in the US and countries all over the world. Milwaukee has a much smaller airport and offers direct flights to only 31 destinations in the US, Canada, and fortunately also the Caribbean. Traveling between Washington and Milwaukee is actually quite easy. Southwest has a direct flight twice a day, and it only takes about 2 hours. What helps Milwaukee a lot is that we have one of the largest US airports close by, and that is Chicago O'Hare. It takes only a little over an hour by car to get there, which makes it a great option if you want to catch a direct flight right out of Chicago. Washington has a lot of things to do. In terms of culture and history, not many cities on this continent come even close. Founded in 1790, Washington is unique amongst American cities because it was established specifically to serve as the nation's capital. Knowing this, it seems quite ironic that to this day the residents still lack full self-governance. After all, no taxation without representation was one of the key issues of America's independence. I find it interesting that you can see this as a slogan on Washington license plates. Looks like this debate will continue for a while. Milwaukee does not have to concern itself with these types of issues. It is Wisconsin's biggest economic hub, while government affairs are left to the state capital in Madison. When it comes to food, I hear mixed things about Washington, but I have to say I have had personally the pleasure of eating very well in DC. Milwaukee is stereotypically known for beer, brats, and cheese, but has actually a surprisingly good food and restaurant scene. You'll find everything from comfort food to fine dining. Milwaukee has also a lot of amazing chef-owned and operated restaurants, especially in the downtown area. They cook with a lot of passion, and you can definitely tell the difference. When you're done eating and want to spend some time outdoors, Wisconsin has a lot to offer. There are plenty of state parks to go hiking, more than 15,000 inland lakes to enjoy, and of course there is also Lake Michigan, which is really great for boating and sailing. A lot of people travel to Wisconsin every year specifically for fishing and hunting, which is one of the best in the country. The only thing that's missing, in my opinion, are the mountains. Wisconsin is pretty flat, so not many good opportunities for skiing or snowboarding, but in exchange, snowmobiling is a big thing here, especially up north, where you get a lot more snow, allowing up to 25,000 miles of groomed snowmobile trails every winter. But also city life has a lot to offer year-round, which brings me to the next topic. Milwaukee's downtown area is located right on the shore of Lake Michigan, and with over $6 billion spent in new construction and quite a bit more in progress, change is everywhere, and Milwaukee is getting clearly a lot more modern. Great examples for this are also the historic 3rd Ward and the relatively young Deer District around the new Milwaukee Bucks Arena. Unlike Washington, DC, where no building can exceed the height of the Capitol, Milwaukee has a growing number of high-rise condo and office buildings downtown. Everything else is usually just regular 1- and 2-story homes, but they look actually quite a bit different. Washington has a large number of townhomes in many different sizes and configurations, which is something you actually won't find in Milwaukee. Townhomes are defined as houses that share at least one wall with the neighboring house, and you see them everywhere in DC. They are generally more affordable than freestanding homes, but are also oftentimes quite narrow and don't offer the same level of privacy as a freestanding home. The Milwaukee housing stock consists mostly of freestanding homes, usually with a good-sized yard and a 2-car garage. And even on the smaller urban lots, houses do have a sizable distance between them. The further you go out from downtown, the bigger the lots usually get. Most of the homes in the suburbs come with a sizable yard, oftentimes half an acre or more, and many of the best school districts are also located in the suburbs and therefore very popular with families. Let's talk about people. Washington is well known to be a very diverse city, while Milwaukee, on the other hand, arguably still has a little bit of work to do in this compartment. But in general, people in Milwaukee are pretty relaxed and laid back. You may have heard the term Midwest friendly, and that is actually a real thing and something you can get used to quite easily when you live here. But it never ceases to surprise me when clients from out of state comment on how friendly and helpful locals have been to them. So it is a Midwest thing, which maybe has also something to do with our next topic. Let's talk about income first. Wages are generally higher in Washington, DC, but the difference is smaller than you might expect. The median household income in DC is $80,822, while in Milwaukee the same position pays $65,803, which is about 18% less. However, the overall cost of living in DC is about 61% higher. Housing is the biggest contributor at about 157% more. Transportation is 15% more, food and groceries about 15% more, and entertainment is about 26% higher. Healthcare is the only exception and actually 14% lower in DC. Renting an apartment in Washington is quite expensive. A median 2-bedroom apartment will cost you currently $3,199, which is more than twice to $1,436 in Milwaukee. Buying a home also requires a higher budget in DC. A median 3-bedroom home is currently about $1,130,000 compared to $416,000 in the Milwaukee metro area, and this also includes the suburbs. Anything over $600,000 is considered luxury in the Milwaukee metro area, and only 2% of all homes are priced over $1 million. Taxes are everyone's favorite topic. When it comes to taxation, Milwaukee has actually a bit of an advantage. Not only we are taxed a little lower, but sorry, have to rub it in here, Wisconsin gets at least a vote in Congress in exchange for the taxes we pay. Anyway, the Tax Foundation ranks Washington at number 39 out of 50 states with a 12% combined tax burden, compared to Milwaukee at number 32 with 10.2%. And if you're curious, Alaska has the lowest tax burden with 4.6%, followed by Wyoming at 7.5%, and most of the Sunbelt states come in at around 9%. Of course, New York State is the worst with 15%. So there you have it. If you have more questions about the cost of living in Milwaukee, I have made an entire video on the topic, and here is a link if you want to see that one. Earlier in the video, I promised you a quick review of 3 very different example Milwaukee communities. So in the next 60 seconds, you can get a sense of what living in Milwaukee looks like. The historic 3rd Ward is part of the older downtown area and used to be a warehouse district, but is today one of the trendiest places to live in Milwaukee, especially if you enjoy living close to water, prefer a condo lifestyle, and like being in walking distance to great shops and restaurants. Shorewood is a very interesting mix of urban and suburban lifestyle on Milwaukee's North Shore, with a lot of beautiful residential homes dating back to the early 1900s. Shorewood offers a fair amount of urban entertainment, yet relatively quiet and still close enough to downtown, and it is also very popular with families. Mequon is an example of a suburban neighborhood. Homes are generally larger, often newer, and built on lots that are at least 1 to 3 acres large. While home prices are higher, property taxes are lower. Commute time to downtown Milwaukee is typically about 25 minutes. I know this very well because that's where I live. Alright, let's get back to a comparison, Washington versus Milwaukee. Bottom line, both cities come with their pros and cons and offer a very different lifestyle. Which one is better for you is certainly a matter of personal preference. I am probably a bit biased towards Milwaukee, but would love to read about your opinion in the comments below. If you're interested to see more about Milwaukee's different neighborhoods, you can find a lot of neighborhood reviews on my YouTube channel, and you can click on the link right here on the screen. If you're thinking about moving to Milwaukee, definitely check out my website onpointrg.com and download our free relocation guide with about 40 pages and a lot of information about Milwaukee. You can also sign up for access to the Milwaukee MLS system and start looking for properties like a pro. That's all I had for you today. Please give this video a quick like if you found it interesting. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you at the next one.